Here we go. And I will be starting with my screen as usual. Here we go. So, welcome everybody to our last and fourth public lectures. It was very busy weeks lately with all this knowledge sharing. First of all, please make sure your microphone is mute. Use the chat section to ask questions during presentations. We will be able also to have debates, so please do raise your hand, and also you can use all the reaction buttons. This session is recorded and streamed live in case you don't want to put on your camera. And if you have any inquiries, please email us at placemakingmena@gmail.com. So who we are first. Placemaking MENA, it's a wonderful platform gathering peoples, partners from the Middle East countries, professionals, practitioners, activists, municipalities, and organizations adopting placemaking concept to improve and activate public spaces. And it's founded by Ronnie. So our objective, yes, is to promote placemaking as a people-centered approach to support local communities in transforming their public spaces into vital spaces. We want to make the built environment meaningful, healthier, more human, and to maximize, of course, the creative patterns of use within the city. We want to promote free dynamic recreational public spaces, vibrant social and cultural activities, promoting placemaking as a possible strategy for peacemaking, especially through social inclusion and interaction among different community groups. So, and most of all, we always emphasize on enhancing volunteerism and civic engagement spirit through involving the youth and also the children. So where we are covering all the MENA region, from Kuwait, Morocco, Qatar, Tunisia, Bahrain, Iraq, Lebanon, Oman, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Libya, Palestine, Syria, Yemen, and Sudan. And I hope that sooner we will have also other countries like Algeria, part of our network. So why we are doing all these public lectures? These public lectures are part of LILCOL project, which is a pilot project. I didn't see any other project alike, because it's an incubation online of placemaking projects submitted by organization, individuals, informal movements, and that we are training today, and we will continue our training next year to have these projects implemented. So this pilot online incubation of placemaking project, it's a workshop about placemaking first. So these lectures are part of it. And of course, we want through that to engage the community to improve their public spaces. So we have 5 projects. We have a project which is Masahat al-Hay, Jordan Amman by Sarah Nawar. We have a project from Bena Foundation, from Hub for Hope. And we have Rehab Placemaking by Kausar, by Billy Aboujoud. And we have a Khartoum Living Crossroads project from Tasnim Ghaffar 26 Daraja. And we have the full design studio from Lebanon working on a beautiful site that we've seen yesterday, and we'll give you more information sooner. So the lecture that we had already a lot of lectures. We have the first one, which is very important one. It's about transforming cities and public spaces through placemaking that took place the 20th. And we had social and cultural aspect of public spaces in the MENA region, when we've seen the importance of social transformations as a process to be able to conduct placemaking projects. We saw Rehab Placemaking Lebanon, another side of placemaking, using design, using artworks, and especially with Rania Halawi placing art pieces in public space and their impacts. And we've seen yesterday Placemaking and Rebuilding Collective Identity, Think Global, Act Local by Reem Bouhamdan, part of our platform, very active member, and we're happy all the time to see her. And we have the story of Kawakba by Karina Zouin, and it was a beautiful example of how we can conduct a project, especially in a condition where we have a refugee community and a host community, to create some middle ground for coexistence. And of course, today what we'll have with us, we are very pleased to have with us Olfa BEN MEDIEN. in public spaces in Greater Tunis to the test by sustainability and integration. Olfa BEN MEDIEN, she's an architect from ENAU, École Nationale d'Architecture et d'Urbanisme de Tunis. She's holding a research master in urbanism and regional planning and a doctoral degree in urban planning. She's a member of the Sustainable City and Built Environment Research Laboratory in ISTEUB, University of Carthage, since 2017. She's an assistant professor at the Urban Planning Department from 2008 to 2014, and she's Secretary General of the Africa Middle East section of Apéro International, and since 2014, and member of the National Committee of the drafting of the Tunisian Habitat III report in Quito, Ecuador, 2017. And we will have as well Modalités de production des espaces publics et nouvelles pratiques de la citoyenneté en Tunisie by Sandes Zahir from Tunisia. She's a landscape engineer, doctor in landscape science and architecture, university assistant landscape department, and she's also a researcher, and she has a professional experience in the field of landscape architecture and spatial planning. She's a founding member of the Tunisian Association of Engineers and Landscape Architects in Tunisia. She's a treasurer of the International Federation of Landscape Architecture in Africa, and she has been an expert since 2016 with VNG International, CLG Tunisia, and the National Federation of Tunisian Communes as part of local government support program. We are happy as a third speaker to have with us Layla Zibar for circularity, refugeehood, and placemaking in Iraqi Kurdistan, the Syrian refugee camp cases. Layla Zibar is a PhD candidate in a joint doctoral agreement between KU Leuven and BTU Germany. She's obtained her master's degree from Cairo University in urban design and community development, and her BA in architectural engineering from Aleppo University. Layla, she's Kurdish by origin, and she was born and raised in Aleppo, Syria. She currently lives in Leuven, Belgium. She worked with several NGOs and design studios in spatial upgrading and urban intervention participatory project for disadvantaged groups. She worked as a project consultant with Broda in Iraqi Kurdistan, as a project coordinator in Egypt with Œcumene Studio, and urban designer in CDC Egypt. So, and last, it's me. So we'll have a presentation, very, I hope, short, about coexisting through placemaking. I'm the founder of Œcumene Studio and also VP SDG program at SES World. It's a multi-international corporation for safe.
She's co-founder of Sharnaka.
Yes,
Right to
co-founder
Play.
of.
She's a Tunisian architect, urban development strategist, and researcher. The Œcumene Studio is where architect is questioned, rethought, and redefined to become a process to rebuild societies, empower communities, and support them to transmit their leg through generation. A complex mechanism to design possibilities for positive impact. So this is INSAF.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you very much. So I will give now the hand for Olfa. She can share her screen and we can start with our first presentation. So you are, yes, perfect.
Yeah, good. You see my screen?
Perfect, yes.
Yes, full screen. I put full screen one. Yes, very good. So at first, I want to thank INSAF for this opportunity that she gave to me. Thank you, INSAF. I'm glad to be with you, and I hope I will present my lecture with correct English. I will try. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much for joining us.
So my lecture is with the title Public Space in Greater Tunis to the Test by Sustainability and Integration, as well as prepared by myself and my colleague Iman Bouziri, who is a designer and a doctor in design, interior design. So public space in Greater Tunis or in the MENA are undoubtedly the keystone of modern urban planning, and we have to, and it has to be thought as a sustainable and inclusive area. So for our lecture, we set two main goals. The first one is to verify public spaces' role to make more sustainable the Tunis city. And the second one is to understand which design is better for sustainability and for inclusive public space. So comparing several examples as Belvedere Park or Manzessis Square or Human Rights Garden. So many examples to answer for our question. We put an assumption regarding those goals, which says that verifying public spaces sustainability is based on three indicators: social one, economic, and finally environmental. So we put three key question for three dimensions: social one, economic, and environmental. How public spaces in Tunis provide social integration, and which space design can improve this character? What is the public space role to develop economic sector and activity in them neighborhood, and how design make those areas more attractive and promote commercial and leisure activity in its surrounding? How public space, especially green ones, can contribute to preserve an environment? How green parks design can confirm this role in and how it can be support to build awareness through environmental culture. Our methodology to answer to these three questions is based on field work and survey. This experiment is based on the city of Tunis and its public space. We need an empirical word investigating users on their perception of public space. We also use participant observation to do an in-depth study of users' practices, morphological analysis of public spaces, and it will be done throughout a study of 5 case studies, which are Park Belvedere, which is a green, it's a greater park with 100 hectares, a public square of Manzessis in a housing neighborhood, a public garden, human rights. I show it in the, I will show it. So Manzessis Square is two pictures. A human rights public garden, who is a linear park located on one of the main streets in Tunis city, Mohamed V, and the public square Place d'Afrique in the downtown Lafayette city. I just put this my case study in the map. All of these cases or the public space are in the Greater Tunis. So let's say how public spaces act as a lever of sociability, urbanity, and governance. How this, let's say, empty spaces in the urban fabric works for sociability, for citizenry. The public spaces studies for this lecture, to say, have a high ownership. They are used by diverse population, all ages, genders, and social classes. Public spaces practice are varied also we can say relaxation, leisure, children games, strolling, date, sometimes young people meeting, family picnic, just a nap, or and users are individually, in couple, in family, or in groups. But every time is we can say that it's a high ownership of those public spaces. Let's say that public spaces are moved from just urbanity and welcomingness to being a real identities area. Like the example of Menzies Square, which is playing a significant role in improving the neighborhood urbanity. Picture.
Olfa, you are mute.
Oh,
Yes,
I'm sorry.
come back. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
So we lost you in this slide. You just have to repeat what you were saying, just like for a few seconds.
I'm talking about Menzies Square as an example of public space was playing a significant role in improving the neighborhood's urbanity, like we see in the Menzies is a territory where sociability is shaped, especially with young people, and where belonging to this area, this Menzies Square has becoming stronger throughout culture events, music concerts, etc. Also, we can say that public space can be a support of governance and citizen participatory. I told you that Menzies is becoming an identity area throughout these tags and graffiti on the wall. Young people marks their territory. At the same time, we can, when this territory is attacked, the inhabitants, helped by civil society, have organized themselves to defend it. As we talk about the example of the demonstration against building a part of Belvedere, and how inhabitants from whole Tunis, the city, Greater Tunis, are organized to defend this territory, and which is identity area. We talk about civil society. Yes, there is several associations who works hard to like Les Amis du Belvédère, the Belvedere France association, which has set up a participatory project involving here in this picture, involving Jebel Ahmar inhabitants to design shared gardens and playground in order to preserve the park from the informal housing advance. Unfortunately, this project was not carried out. We talk also about l'association de protection et de développement durable de la zone de Menzies, which is a very active association to preserve and to preserve and to promote the sustainable development in the zone of in green zone Menzies. It works throughout sustainable agriculture. It defends the park against the pressures of urbanization and land speculations. How to design a public space, improving sociability, ownership, citizenship. We need a space with differentiated entities to create multiple territory and multiple practices. As we see in Belvedere, which is designed with differentiated entities, such as a green park, a fitness trail, square, a zoo, a children's playground, a cafe, and it allows users to be free and to a higher ownership throughout moving around the park, throughout or doing exercise, walking through its shady paths, or to contemplate nature, play, or to simply take a nap, or simply far niente. So we need multiple territory, and we need a simple design and an open design, like we see in the Menzies Square, which is designed. Its design give him a character of welcoming and a welcoming impression since the entrance. The square is formed by several platforms with elevation difference, giving to each groups its own territory. So we can see young group, we can see family, we can see children's. Each group have its own territory, and it's possible with this kind of separated and differentiated entity of areas. We can also say that design built an image to the public square, to the public space, imposing a form of uses. As Menzies' example, with its modern design, this modern design organized around a futuristic, futuristic sculpture. This kind of design, this modern design, attracts young people who appropriate the square by tags, by games in group. The square has become their territory, their meeting point, a leisure area where they can play music, they can play skateboard, they make a street dance. This are the main activity of young people who, with the high ownership, thanks to its modern and simple design. This design, as I say, is open and give users a sense of safety, because we can, with an open structure, the visual perspective is open from inside, as if we are in the theater. Each one can see all the areas, and from outside of the sea. It's a space with a night light, and also with an urban dynamic and bustling atmosphere, thanks to several facilities. This shopping center, it's a big shopping center, and culture and sports center, which is planned in its surrounding. For design, also we can say that street furniture coupled with vegetation can improve the public space ownership. As we see in the picture, street furniture and trees give public space a kind of friendly and welcoming character with, like we see, this man is taking a nap on the park benches. The many gazebo are picnic tables, also trees, here trees, palmier. So coupled together, street furniture and vegetation can improve the public spaces ownership. They make easier the ownership and the urban practice, the user individually and or by way of groups and acts enjoy sense of ownership of a public space. So let's verify how public space can be a vector for development of economic activity. We are sure that public space generate economic activity and can create also jobs. They create jobs opportunity by developing economic activity like trade, catering, leisure, in surrounding area. They, in the same time, generate formal and informal activity, but it's also a job opportunity. At least it's the job opportunity. Here we see the informal activity with the stalls and street food, selling toys just outside of the entrance, the park, Belvedere Park's entrance. Here we have the formal activity with inflatable games in Manzesi Square or cafe in Belvedere Parks and restaurant in the surrounding of Place d'Afrique Green Park. In reality, there is a win-win relationship between public spaces and its neighboring economy activity. And we can see that each party benefits from the population flow and participates in the mutual economic activity development. The design of public space makes it attractive and gives an added value to its immediate surrounding. We can also say that public spaces improve the living environment. They improve landscape of neighboring area and leads in sometimes to its gentrification. Our survey showed us that the rents are sometimes 2 times more expensive near the Manzesi Square than the rest of the neighborhood. And how can we design a more attractive public space that's more conducive to economic development? We said that public space and its design participate to build the image of the city. It can be, it acts as a showcase, a vitrine for visitors to the city and helps to improve its image. As example, we know that Belvedere Park is a real postcard of a green city, postcard of the city of Tunis. It thus contributes to the development of tourism activity in Greater Tunis. Like this, likewise, the square of human rights, which gives a double image to the city. It's a linear park in planned in Mohammed Al Khamis, one of the main streets of the capital, to image one model with a modern design and another who sound to be a part of Medina heritage with throughout sculptures reproducing the Medina wall. To design, to improve economic activity, space, public space have to be designed to improve polyfunctionality. So this design is based on an easy access. So we have an open perspective since the entrance, a vegetal and mineral design, and especially, as we see in the study case of Manzestis, multi-purpose platforms. How green public spaces can preserve the environment and establish an environmental cultures. Green spaces have a great role in preserving the environment. Quality and of life in the city. Sorry?
It's fine. It's a new participant, so I just
okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's maximizing the maintaining wildlife in urban environment. It can improve through improving air quality, the softening of temperature, and reducing l'îlot de chaleur, urban heat islands, reducing noise pollution to public spaces act for better environmental culture with several events. Several events are planned by Belvedere Friends Association in order to bring children closer to nature and raising awareness of environmental and climate issues. Those events improve social mixity by gathering inhabitants, whole inhabitants around a common causes, environmental issues. We have to design a responsible public space that respects biodiversity, like Belvedere Park, which for its design, the vegetation elements in the park are a local flora, thus ensuring respect for local biodiversity with olive trees, pinus, eucalyptus. Also, we can say that the design of the park exploits the natural element, bringing the user closer to nature, as the example of the this large tree of the Belvedere, which is called the tree of Tarzan, شجرة Tarzan, and which becomes a kind of landmark in the city. We use also a natural design, naturalist, to bring nature closer. The natural design, we use it in the urban furniture. As such, this stone, the stone benches arranged like rocks in Place d'Afrique, or organic forms to design roads, pedestrian path, and artificial lake. To conclude, we saw that we need an open space with rather mineral dominates to give more functional space, to provide more social, economic, and culture development. At the same time, we need a green dominated design for more efficiency environmental efficiency and to give a certain added value to the economic activity for a surrounding area. We need small public space to improve sociability in the level of the neighborhood. But in the same time, we need larger parks to have a centrality role for the whole city or sometimes for international centrality. So design can be functional, can be modern, can be naturalistic, can be based on heritage, but all this kind of design provides successful public space. We need the whole of this different space to constitute a vector of sustainable development for our cities. This differentiated management of public space must be combined to a good governance. That is, for me, the solution. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I wish it was clear in spite of my English.
It was very, very clear. It was inspiring. It was really to the point. And thank you very much for, putting all these together, especially that, we are so much interested to know what is happening in Tunisia in terms also to public space, to design, to urban planning. And I think that you covered a wide range of let's say, all these urban systems that we need to create a more inclusive, more vibrant public spaces, and also the role of the planner within, because here we are having examples or planned public spaces where there is much more, as you said, the need for a good local governance, working together with its citizens and also placemakers. So, what we will be doing now, it's that we go with the presentation from Sondis, because after that we will have a debate. There is already a question here from Sarah Noir, so we will keep it for later. After Sondis, then we will have the case for Tunisia, and then we can move on with our other speakers. So thank you very much, Olfa, for the presentation. And we go.
I mute my...
Yes. Sondis, if you can unmute yourself. What we will have, it will be a bit special. We won't be using the interpretation because it's a bit complicated, and we thought that will be the best that I will translate just after Sondis. So we did our homework today, and we did, a script as well to help me translating as fast as be also very faithful and transmit what Sondis want to say truthfully. So go ahead, Sondis, you can share your screen and we can...
Thank you. Merci beaucoup, Ensa, surtout pour la traduction. Alors, je vais essayer de suivre un peu le plan de la présentation, comme ça c'est plus simple. Je vais partager mon écran.
So Sondis will be sharing her screen.
C'est bon, est-ce que vous voyez mon écran là?
Not yet. So we are seeing your screen, but I think it's, yes, it comes. Yeah, here it is. Very good. So the title will be Modality of Production of Public Space and New Citizen Practice in Tunisia.
Voilà, exactement. Alors, tout d'abord, merci pour l'invitation. Donc, justement, je vais parler aujourd'hui des modalités de production des espaces publics en Tunisie, en présentant surtout les nouvelles pratiques de la citoyenneté dans les villes tunisiennes. Alors, je vais commencer d'abord par définir l'espace public.
So I'll start in the beginning with the definition of what is the public space.
Pour mettre ensuite dans un contexte historique les créations des espaces publics.
Then to be able to put in a historical, the historical background of the creation of public spaces in Tunisia.
Ensuite, donc, je vais parler un peu de l'évolution des modalités de production et de la nouvelle approche participative des citoyens.
And then after that, we will talk about the production of how the production of different paradigms to create the public spaces and also the emergence of participatory approaches and local democracy.
Et je vais terminer en parlant de 3 exemples de cette démarche participative.
And then I will be concluding with 3 examples of these participatory approaches to create public spaces.
Alors, pour définir les espaces publics, je vais commencer par spécifier qu'il s'agit là des espaces publics au pluriel et qu'on va parler dans cette présentation des lieux physiques, quel que soit leur statut juridique, c'est-à-dire public ou privé.
In the plural, public spaces refer to physical places. So we will be talking here of the plural definition of public spaces, which is also has a public or private. This is what we call it, the, let's say, the statute of public spaces, if it's judicial or not. So in
Donc, donc les espaces dont je vais parler sont finalement des espaces où on peut circuler, mais on peut bien rester également. Et c'est des espaces qui ont été produits soit par des paysagistes, des architectes, mais également des urbanistes.
So in the plural, public spaces refer to physical places, regardless of their legal status, in which the public can circulate or stay there. These are therefore concrete public spaces produced by landscapers, architects, and town planners.
Et je vais profiter ici pour attirer l'attention sur la différence qu'il y a entre le lieu public dont on va parler et la sphère publique. Donc, comme l'explique bien dans son livre l'espace public de Thierry Paco, il montre très bien que comment l'espace public est avant tout une notion de philosophie politique et que c'est un espace qui commence par cette philosophie politique et se traduit ensuite sous forme d'organisation territoriale au sein de la ville.
So the public space has been the subject of reflection and research, in particular by sociologists and geographers like Joseph, Serfati, Ripoll. We draw attention to the difference between the public sphere. Indeed, Thierry Paco, in his book L'Espace Public, shows very well how public space is before a notion of political philosophy, which is then reflected in the territorial organization of the city. As such, it's important when studying these places to consider public space as a physical as well as a cultural phenomenon.
Donc voilà, je vais autant parler de l'aspect espace public comme étant un phénomène physique, comme étant aussi bien un phénomène culturel. Donc pour nous, les paysagistes, comme je suis paysagiste, donc je vais aussi donner la définition et ce que représente l'espace public pour les paysagistes. Donc il ne s'agit pas seulement d'un espace accessible à tous, mais c'est un espace qui doit être avant tout un espace ouvert et avec des activités multiples. Alors, dans ce sens-là, il y a le paysagiste Michel Corazzo qui dit que, outre le fait que l'espace il doit être accessible à tous, sans exception et sans restriction, l'espace public doit être caractérisé par sa polyfonctionnalité.
So as I'm a landscape architect, I also, more interested about the cultural aspect of the public space. The public space is not only a space which is accessible for everyone, but it's also a space which is very open to multiple activities. And she quotes Michel Corazzo. He's showing that besides the fact that it is accessible to all, there is another characteristic of the public space is that it must be multifunctional. before everything else.
Donc, les espaces publics, ils doivent remplir deux conditions essentielles. La première condition, c'est qu'ils doivent être ouverts à tout le monde. Et la deuxième, c'est qu'ils doivent rester comme espace qui accueille différents usages. Et quand on dit différents usages, c'est-à-dire des usages artistiques, de loisirs, de rencontres, de divertissement, mais également des lieux d'expression de toutes sortes, de manifestations et aussi d'usages politiques. Et dans ce sens-là, je voulais juste ouvrir une parenthèse par rapport à cette dimension politique où on peut exprimer clairement les positions où on peut manifester. À ce titre, donc le boulevard Habib Bourguiba au cœur de Tunis, ou la place Mohamed Ali, la place Qasba à Tunis, d'ailleurs sont devenus aujourd'hui le symbole de la révolution tunisienne vu les sit-ins qui ont eu lieu dans ces espaces-là.
So basically that for me, the public spaces must fulfill a number of conditions. It should be first to be an open space to all without restrictions, and also a space that accommodate different uses like leisure, coffee, cultural exhibitions, performance, etc. But also it has to be a space for expression and for revolution, and that the people, like for example, Boulevard Habib Bourguiba or the Place Mohamed Ali or Al Qasba in Tunisia have always become symbol of the Tunisian revolution because they were the place where people gathered and have been able, you know, to express themselves politically. So public spaces are an essential element for the living environment, and they are also a major element for the image of the city, but also they are a major hub for expression.
Donc justement, à côté de cet aspect d'usage différent, il y a l'aspect aussi esthétique de l'espace public comme étant un élément d'abord essentiel de notre cadre de vie, mais aussi un élément majeur de l'image de la ville, une image qui va qui va dépendre aussi de la nature de chaque ville, de la nature de chaque pays, mais aussi qui va refléter une certaine identité de cette image de la ville. Alors, je vais directement passer au contexte de la création des espaces publics, ces espaces qui remontent à l'intérieur.
Yes, sorry, Sandos. I will just translate a little bit. So basically, of course, the image of the city represented by these public spaces will differ according to the cities, to the countries, to their context, etc. But what we'll be starting now is to put the context of how public spaces have been created or emerged in the context of Tunisia. Mm-hmm.
Alors, je vais passer au contexte de création des espaces publics. Je ne vais pas remonter très loin dans l'histoire. Je vais commencer par la fin du 19e siècle pour dire que dans nos villes maghrébines, elles se caractérisaient par un tissu ou des médinas présentant une forte interpénétration entre le public et le privé. En fait, la différenciation du public et du privé dans nos villes tunisiennes, mais c'est également le cas dans les villes arabo-musulmanes, est elle-même très complexe, c'est-à-dire qu'elle ne permet pas d'appréhender ce type d'espace, les espaces publics, correctement à travers une approche classique, et que cette dualité espace public et espace privé, pardon, elle est beaucoup plus subtile chez nous, où ces mots n'ont pas le même sens que dans la culture occidentale, par exemple, et où les espaces publics ne sont pas forcément privés au public. Et là, je donne l'exemple des hammams, des mosquées, des cafés, des marabouts et des hanouts.
So until the 19th century, our Maghreb towns were characterized by medinas with a strong interpenetration between the public and the private in the public domain. So the differentiation of public and private in Arab Muslim cities in itself, it's very complex. We cannot really even compare it to the Occidental approach of public space. And it doesn't really, the mapping of it or the reading of its spatial dimension doesn't allow for a correct understanding of public space through conventional approaches. So the duality of public and private space is much more subtle with us, where these words do not have the same meaning as in Western culture, and where public spaces are not necessarily private or public.
Alors, au XXe siècle, les choses ont changé parce que les villes, ils ont connu des changements radicaux soutenus par une urbanisation rapide engendrant une transformation fondamentale des rapports, encore une fois, publics et privés. Et il y a eu ainsi l'émergence de divers types d'espaces publics.
Mm-hmm. So in the 20th century, cities experienced radical change supported by rapid urbanization, generating fundamental transformation in public and private relations. There was thus the emergence of various types of public spaces. With colonization, these spaces were diversified and landscaped, some time that continued, and there was especially the appearance of green public spaces in the form of boulevards, public gardens, or public parks.
Alors, avec la colonisation, ces espaces, ils vont être diversifiés et aménagés, chose qui a continué, qui était déjà faite et qui a continué. Et il y a eu surtout l'apparition de nouveaux espaces. Donc, comme vous voyez sur ces images-là, les espaces publics verts étaient jusqu'à l'arrivée des colons français, des espaces à l'intérieur des demeures ou des palais. Et avec la colonisation, il y a eu l'apparition des espaces verts publics sous forme de boulevards, de jardins publics ou de parcs publics également.
So as you see as an example here, the images you see that, the design of especially green spaces and green gardens and parks were within a private property and inside courts of houses. And after the colonization, these patterns or these typologies of landscape have been taken away to be part of, let's say, open spaces accessible by the public. Mm-hmm.
Alors, il y a eu comme premier exemple la promenade de la Marine à Tunis, aujourd'hui le boulevard Bourguiba. Il y a eu également l'aménagement du premier parc urbain en Tunisie, le parc de Secrétaire, dont vient de parler Olfa, par un paysagiste français, et plusieurs autres exemples qui illustrent cette période.
So just to wrap up again, so after the independence, as we said, urbanization beyond the ramparts of the Medina was carried out according to the principle of...
Non, on n'est pas encore là.
On n'est pas encore là? D'accord.
Non, c'est juste,
l'exemple.
Montrer les deux exemples d'aménagement qui ont marqué la période de la colonisation.
So just to give you here also two examples of what have been, that marks, the colonization, the change of planning after colonization in the Medina of Tunis. So this is the Promenade de la Marine Tunis. It's what stay here, and of course it has been, there have been a lot of changes afterwards. And of course we have on the bottom a view from the Belvedere of Tunis, of the different interventions that took place.
Alors, après l'indépendance, l'urbanisation, elle s'est développée au-delà des remparts de la Médina et elle s'est faite surtout suivant des principes de l'urbanisme colonial. Donc, l'urbanisme colonial, même si les colons ne sont plus là, il a continué à exister et il était peu adapté aux modes de vie locaux, ce qui a donné d'ailleurs naissance à des espaces publics sans adéquation avec la forme de la ville et avec les attentes sociales spécifiques des Tunisiens. Même s'il y a eu, après une certaine prise de conscience des autorités publiques de l'importance écologique et sociale des espaces publics verts, mais cette préoccupation s'est traduite finalement surtout de manière quantitative, c'est-à-dire qu'on a commencé à calculer le ratio vert par habitant, plutôt de penser à la nature de ces espaces-là et à comment ils peuvent répondre à une attente sociale.
So after the independence, urbanization beyond the ramparts of the Medina was carried out according to the principles of colonial town planning, little adapted to the local lifestyles, which also gave birth to public spaces without adequacy with the shape of the city and with the specific social expectation of the Maghreb world. Even though there has been an awareness of public authorities of the ecological and social importance of green public spaces, this concern has been reflected mainly in a very quantitative approach where we must more focus on the ratio of green spaces per inhabitants than the importance, or let's say the right of the inhabitants and the type of relationship it has to be induced.
Donc cette période, elle fut marquée par l'aménagement des premiers espaces publics verts réalisés après l'indépendance. Et là, on peut citer cet exemple-là, le jardin Œcumene, le jardin des droits de l'homme, dont a parlé Olfa également, et le jardin Œcumene.
Yes, this period was marked more by the development of the first green public spaces created after the independence, such as Habib Thémer in 1957 and Gorjani Park, the Human Rights Garden.
Alors, la fin ensuite des années 80, elle va être marquée par deux types de production de tissus urbains. Donc, on avait soit des quartiers planifiés, souvent réalisés par des opérateurs publics, où les espaces publics sont très normatifs, ils étaient vraiment sommairement aménagés, et d'ailleurs, c'est ce qui a fait qu'ils étaient faiblement pratiqués. Et d'autre part, on avait des quartiers non réglementaires, et là, on pouvait pas vraiment parler de places ou de lieux publics à part les voies de circulation.
So the end of the 80s was marked by two modes of production of urban fabrics: planned neighborhoods, often built by public operators, where public spaces are very normative, summarily arranged and poorly used, and on the other hand, non-regulatory neighborhoods that leave little room for public places and traffic routes. So apart from a few reflection, which took on an environmental vocation as National Urban Park Program, and which consisted in the management or the design of peri-urban forests, partially and summarily developed as proximity spaces, which is very lacking in most municipalities.
Donc voilà, à part quelques réflexions qui ont pris une vocation environnementale, et là je cite l'exemple du programme national d'aménagement de 100 parcs, mais bon, qui n'a pas abouti à l'aménagement de 100 parcs. C'était un programme qui visait essentiellement à l'aménagement et à la protection des forêts urbaines qui étaient partiellement aménagées et qui étaient des espaces périurbains. Alors, à part ces espaces-là, les espaces de proximité, les espaces verts de proximité ou les espaces publics de proximité étaient vraiment, ils faisaient défaut dans la majorité des communes tunisiennes. Donc, il y a eu aussi une grande opération durant cette période-là d'un projet d'aménagement des berges de lac de Tunis qui était le fruit d'un partenariat entre l'État et un groupe privé saoudien qui a donné donc naissance à des espaces publics marqués par l'absence d'histoire et de la tradition et que vous voyez sur ces photos.
So there was also a very big operation of one of the largest development projects around Lake Tunis, and it's the result of a partnership of the state and a private Saudian group that gave birth to a public space between parentheses marked by the absence of any kind of history or roots or urban tradition.
Et donc tout ça, en fait, toute cette revue historique, c'est pour dire que la question des espaces publics en Tunisie, elle n'a pas vraiment fait l'objet de réflexions particulières dans le processus récent de production urbaine en Tunisie. Donc, finalement, on peut dire que ces espaces-là, ils avaient deux caractéristiques principales. Ils étaient d'abord des espaces hyper fonctionnels et peu appropriés, donc ils étaient souvent délaissés et non utilisés, notamment pour des problèmes de fréquentation. liées parfois à la présence de groupes sociaux indésirables. Et puis, la deuxième caractéristique, c'est que parfois, ils n'étaient pas favorables au rassemblement. Et ça reflétait une volonté politique à l'époque qui est due au contrôle qu'exerçait le pouvoir sur ce type d'endroit.
So the issue of public space has not often been the subject of particular reflection in recent processes of urban production in Tunisia, and has been shown by these examples. And this leads that these spaces, they are characterized by two things. They were hyper functional spaces and not very appropriate, therefore, to little by little neglected at the end, and not used in particular for different problems of undesirable social groups, the antisocial behaviors from certain users, and they were not in favor of the, let's say, the reality, and also they are so much controlled and let's say by the police, I mean by the state itself. So they are not really an open, free spaces where people can basically interact without any control. Mm-hmm.
Alors, je vais passer à l'évolution des modalités de production des espaces publics et qui était marquée par la période de la révolution tunisienne. Donc, on a pu comprendre que les espaces publics, ils étaient très importants comme étant un lieu de rassemblement, de manifestation, d'expression. Et on a commencé à voir un autre visage de l'espace public, à comprendre l'importance des espaces publics dans notre vie. Et il y a eu aussi une autre transformation majeure et qui concerne surtout les modalités de production de l'espace public. En fait, ces espaces-là, ils étaient, avant la Révolution, ils étaient produits exclusivement par les acteurs institutionnels classiques qu'on connaît, donc les ministères, les collectivités locales, mais aussi les entreprises privées. Ensuite, il y a eu l'apparition de nouveaux acteurs qui sont finalement des acteurs qu'avant, ils n'agissaient pas vraiment sur l'espace public. Ces acteurs-là sont d'un côté les associations et les organisations non gouvernementales qui agissent comme porteurs d'intérêts collectifs. Mais il y a aussi d'autres acteurs qui se reflètent sous forme de mouvements citoyens, qui peuvent être une mobilisation, qui peuvent refléter une mobilisation de petits groupes d'individus, des riverains ou des habitants, ou même vraiment des petits groupes de propriétaires d'un logement ou d'un commerce qui vont commencer à défendre des intérêts communs et même parfois individuels.
So after the revolution, there was a transformation in the practices of physical public spaces, but also a major transformation concerning the methods of production of public space. Spaces produced exclusively by traditional institutions, actors like ministries, local authorities, and but also private entrepreneurs are added. These new actors, we can add these new actors who emerged after the revolution, who are on one hand associations, non-governmental organization that acts as a kind of carriers of collective interest. On the other hand, they also act within a framework of citizen movements, mobilizing small groups of individuals. We can say residents of the same neighborhood, owners of the same housing or businesses, to defend their interest, common interest or individual one. Mm-hmm.
Alors, donc, une décennie après la Révolution, aujourd'hui, ça fait 10 ans qu'a eu la Révolution tunisienne, et les acteurs et les responsables en charge des politiques urbaines de Tunisie, heureusement, ils commencent à prendre conscience de la nécessité de penser autrement les espaces publics afin qu'ils répondent au mieux aux besoins et aux attentes de la population.
So 10 years after the revolution, the actors and officials in charge of urban policies in Tunisia are beginning to realize the need to think differently about public spaces so that they best meet the needs and expectations of the population.
Donc aujourd'hui, grâce à la démarche locale entamée depuis 2018 et avec la présence des collectivités locales élues, il y a eu la mise en place d'une démocratie donc, locale en cours et il y a eu une mobilisation pour la recherche des moyens à mettre en place pour concevoir une planification urbaine et une gouvernance territoriale démocratique. Donc, dans ce sens-là, les nouveaux acteurs dont on vient de citer, qui sont les associations non gouvernementales, etc., donc ils commencent déjà à mettre en place des modifications dans les modalités de production de nos espaces publics d'aujourd'hui, en travaillant avec une nouvelle démarche qui est la démarche citoyenne et participative.
So since 2018, the presence of elected local authorities has participated in the establishment of local democracy, thus a mobilization for the search or the mobilization to look for means to put in place to conceive an urban or to design an urban planning and a democratic territorial governance. In the same sense, the new players or actors are already starting to implement changes in the production methods and therefore the uses of public space, which are also becoming at the heart of participatory approaches.
Donc, en menant les projets par la concertation, ces acteurs-là, ils visent trois choses essentielles. Alors, la première, c'est de contribuer à l'acceptabilité des transformations que connaît notre cadre de vie aujourd'hui. La deuxième, c'est d'optimiser ces espaces en les rendant plus accessibles, donc ouverts à tout le monde, dans une nouvelle perspective de droit à la vie. Et puis, la troisième et la plus importante, à mon sens, c'est de renforcer l'attractivité économique des communes et le sentiment d'appartenance des citoyens à la ville et qui pourra justement participer à gérer ces espaces publics-là.
So there are three type of leading projects that has been conducted through consultation. So they aim to contribute to the accessibility of changes in the living environment by promoting social cohesion, optimize these spaces by making them accessible and open to everyone from a right to the city perspective, and to strengthen the economic attractiveness of municipalities and the citizens' sense of belonging, especially to the city.
Donc, pour plusieurs associations et organismes non gouvernementaux qui travaillent actuellement sur les espaces publics, et d'ailleurs ils sont nombreux aujourd'hui, la participation des citoyens, et elle est considérée vraiment comme une manière de rendre plus efficaces ces aménagements, mais pas que les aménagements, la réflexion d'une manière sur la durabilité et l'appropriation des espaces publics. Et donc, ils essayent de collaborer, et ça c'est vraiment très intéressant, avec les collectivités afin d'encourager cette démarche de la participation citoyenne dans l'aménagement des espaces publics et dans une meilleure durabilité grâce à une meilleure appropriation souhaitée.
Oui, Sundus, on ne voit pas tes slides en fait, on est toujours bloqué dans... Voilà, on n'a pas vu tout ça. C'est juste pour te dire. Donc, en fait, for several associations and non-governmental organizations currently working on public spaces, citizen participation is considered a way of making the development of these places more effective and of promoting their sustainability, notably through better ownership. So they try to collaborate with communities in order to encourage the process of citizen participation in order to see if there is a way to make or to develop these spaces more effectively and to promote sustainability.
Alors, j'ai passé directement, pour terminer donc ma présentation, à quelques exemples de démarches participatives auxquelles, il y en a deux auxquelles j'ai participé et un autre dont j'ai suivi de près et qui concerne justement la démarche participative pour la création et pour la planification des espaces publics.
So I will give
Donc,
an example, two examples of participatory approaches and projects that I took part of. There are municipalities and project developers can, oh no, not that. So you're saying that you will giving an example of two main projects where it has been, a major use of participatory approach to involve the community to design and to develop their areas. Go ahead.
Exactement. Donc, le premier exemple, c'est un travail qui a été fait avec une commune du sud tunisien qui s'appelle la commune de Bourrara, en collaboration avec la CILVNG. Donc, c'est une initiative réalisée grâce à un appui financé par le gouvernement du Royaume des Pays-Bas et qui a été mis en œuvre avec l'appui en Tunisie, donc du Centre international de développement pour la gouvernance locale innovante. Et c'est un programme donc, qui s'articule autour de trois composantes essentielles qui visent à terme le renforcement des acteurs centraux de conduite et de mise en place du processus de décentralisation en Tunisie qui a été entamé depuis donc 2018. Et donc, ce processus, moi, je l'ai suivi à travers ce travail avec la commune de Bourrara dans le cadre d'une expertise pour le développement des espaces publics dans cette commune-là.
So the first example, it's a collaboration effort between the municipality of Bourrara and the CLG-VNG corporation. It's an initiative carried out with financial support from the government of Kingdom of the Netherlands, and it's implemented with the support of the International Development Center for Innovative Local Governance. So this program is structured around three strategic components, which ultimately aim to strengthen central and local players in the conduct and implementation of the decentralization process and its sustainability. And the process of citizen participation, I will talk now briefly about the 5 stages to develop and manage the plan for public spaces in this municipality.
Voilà, donc le processus de participation a été fait suivant 5 étapes. Donc, il y a eu le lancement du projet, en expliquant aux différents participants, donc ça c'est des photos de ces ateliers-là, la démarche est pour comprendre aussi leurs besoins et leurs attentes par rapport au projet d'aménagement des espaces publics. Alors là, il y a eu un premier donc, atelier participatif au cours duquel nous avons présenté les idées que nous voulons mettre en place. Alors, le deuxième atelier, lors duquel il y a eu le développement des concepts d'aménagement et la vision qu'on avait d'une manière générale de développement des espaces publics dans cette petite commune. Et puis, il y a eu donc une dernière réunion de formation à la gestion des espaces après la réalisation du projet. Donc, en fait, il n'y a pas aujourd'hui d'aménagement d'espaces publics à Bourrara, mais ce travail-là de participation citoyenne, il a concerné, il a donné lieu à un plan de développement d'une vision des futurs espaces publics à aménager.
So the kick-off meeting, which aimed to explain the process and take note of the needs and expectations of the citizens, the first participatory workshop during which the findings and ideas had been presented and discussed. The second workshop was more about the development of the concepts of the first outcomes of the first workshop and the evaluation, and of course to develop a global vision for all the public spaces in question. We did a training meeting for space management after the completion of the project itself.
Alors, le deuxième exemple, c'est celui d'une commune toujours au sud tunisien, à côté d'une ville, de la ville de Gafsa. La commune, elle s'appelle Lecture. Et ce projet aussi, c'est le fruit d'une collaboration entre deux associations, l'association Œcumene et l'association Elle, la collaboration entre paysagistes et sculpteurs. Mais ce qui est intéressant dans ce projet-là aussi, c'est qu'il y a eu cette approche participative. Et l'aménagement, il fut conçu et réalisé en étroite collaboration avec la société civile et les riverains. Donc là, vous voyez une photo qui résume bien le paysage de cette commune, les éléments identitaires de cette commune, qui ont été, comme le montre cette vue en 3D du projet, l'inspiration de l'architecte paysagiste, d'abord par les éléments du relief, mais également par les matériaux, les couleurs, etc. Donc, le fruit de cette collaboration est aujourd'hui bien visible à travers l'adaptation de l'aménagement au contexte local et l'appropriation rapide par les habitants. Donc là, je vais vous montrer également, parce que c'est un projet qui a été réalisé, des images de cet espace public aménagé sous forme d'aire de jeu pour enfants.
So the second example is that of the collaboration between the municipality of Lecture, funded by Tfannen Association in collaboration with ATAI Association for the establishment of a child-friendly play area. The development was designed and carried out in close collaboration with the civil society and the residents. The fruit of this collaboration, as you can see it clearly in these photos, that the landscape and the designer, they took into account all the context of the local context of the site, but also different features, and it has been very rapidly appropriated by the residents and the children, as you can see in these photos, where the site became vibrant and used by all the community.
Alors, le dernier exemple dont je vais vous parler, c'est un exemple très intéressant pour moi parce qu'il n'émane pas d'un grand mouvement assez solide et bien structuré. C'est une expérimentation qui a été mise en place entre artistes, étudiants, paysagistes, sculpteurs et des élèves, comme vous voyez sur les photos, d'une école à Testour, au nord de Tunis et de la Tunisie. Et cette expérimentation, elle est mise en place par un groupe qui essaye de mettre en œuvre d'autres manières de vivre, en fait, de vivre ensemble, à travers un projet qui s'inspire des dessins d'enfants. Oui, Anta?
Non, c'est pas moi, c'est quelqu'un qui a son microphone ouvert. Donc, j'essaye de... Emna, est-ce que tu peux m'entendre, s'il te plaît? Emna, Ayouni, est-ce que tu peux vraiment... Voilà, merci Emna. D'accord, c'est bien. Tu peux continuer.
Merci. Alors, cette expérimentation mise en place par un groupe qui essaye de mettre en œuvre d'autres manières de vivre, à travers un projet très original qui s'inspire des dessins d'enfants. Donc, le tracé du projet, il va partir des dessins et des images qu'ont fait les enfants dans le cadre d'un atelier participatif. Et ces ateliers-là, ils ont donné lieu à un projet qui a fait beaucoup plaisir aux enfants puisqu'ils s'inspirent vraiment de leurs dessins. Alors, ce collectif qui n'a pas duré dans le temps et s'est dissous, malheureusement, mais montre qu'une nouvelle forme de l'engagement contemporain des citoyens peut être possible et que l'émergence de collectifs qui se mobilisent autour d'une cause à un certain moment et qui construisent des pratiques novatrices et puis qui se dissolvent, ils peuvent être plus tard, ils peuvent se rattacher plus tard à des grands mouvements qui sont beaucoup plus structurels.
So the third example does not come from a large movement that is strong or well structured, but it was much more a pilot project conducted by an informal movement from artists, students, and school children from Tastour. This experimentation that has been conducted tried to conduct several artistic and participatory workshops with children. And of course, the children drawings has been the source of inspiration for the artist to take, you know, them into to realities, let's say. And unfortunately, this collective didn't last. It has been dissolved later on. But this, let's say, pilot project showed a new form of contemporary engagement, if we can say so. So there is an emergence of collectives, informal ones, that are mobilized around a purpose, a cause, that try to raise new ways or new practices, innovative one, to be able to design and shape collective spaces.
Donc, tous ces exemples-là, et là, je termine avec cette conclusion, tous ces exemples-là, ils démontrent et rappellent l'importance des espaces publics nécessaires d'abord au fonctionnement de nos vies, mais nécessaires également à nos vies. Et pourtant, aujourd'hui, beaucoup d'entre eux ne sont pas valorisés, ne sont pas fréquentés, sont délaissés ou sont dans des états de dégradation avancés. Il faut dire que les communes aujourd'hui ne disposent pas des moyens financiers et humains nécessaires et parfois ils ne disposent pas de savoir-faire afin de maintenir ces espaces-là et de les gérer comme il faut. Il faut dire aussi que les nouveaux acteurs comme les associations et les organisations non gouvernementales, ils peuvent jouer un rôle très important, et ça on l'a vu à travers ces différents exemples, aussi bien dans la production de ces espaces publics que dans l'entretien et la gestion durable de ces espaces-là, dans le sens où la participation citoyenne, elle peut jouer un rôle important dans la durabilité et dans la gestion. Chose qu'on peut vérifier dans les années à venir en observant les projets qui ont été réalisés ou aussi les projets en cours de réalisation, et on pourra à ce moment-là tirer les enseignements nécessaires pour pouvoir développer cette démarche citoyenne.
So to conclude, it's very important to remember that public spaces are very, very necessary to the functioning of the city. And yet it's not very highly valued. And most of them that has been conducted are very rapidly degrading. There is a huge degradation of these public spaces. And most of the cases, especially in Tunisian cities, the municipality does not have the necessary financial or human resources to, or the know-how for the maintenance of these spaces or to manage them. So the new actors, the emergence of these new actors had an important role to produce these spaces, but also to be able to continue their management and also their maintenance. And we need a lot of, let's say, experience and example and pilot project to be able afterwards to learn from them and to be able to get some lessons to be learned that we are able to enhance and to create, let's say, a typology, or let's say an example or a framework through which we will be able to design our future public spaces. So I hope
merci pour votre attention et surtout merci Inta pour la traduction.
Thank you for your attention, and you're welcome, Sondis, and thank you very much for this presentation. It's really nice to see Tunisia as example. Is very rare, and sometimes we think that you know it's always in the other region. I hope that our participants coming from all over the world have seen also that in Tunisia we have a lot of work that has been going the late 10 years. And this is something wonderful to see, especially that I think the example of Tunisia shows very well also let's say the collaborative work between municipalities, the government, the state, and also local civil society and the citizens. This gives a very great ground to have and to reach, let's say, more inclusive spaces and sustainable one. So Emna, please, can you turn off your microphone because we can listen to everything in your house. So, so we have questions before we start with Layla. We have a question for this sessions. So the first question is, let me see here to everyone. We have John from Jassim Al-Nashmi. He said gentrification is good for the landlord when let's say when the land price increases, but in some cases that is not the same as the residents. So actually the residents are forced to leave the area. Parks and vegetations are good, but how do we avoid relocating the residents of the place who can't afford the rent anymore? So this is, I think, a question for Olfa, because you mentioned that some of the rent due to the upgrade of certain places have been rising. And of course, we have another question, if you can, I can state them all. So Sarah Nawar, she said, can you please talk a bit on how the maintenance of such big scale open public spaces is maintained? How do they deal with acts of vandalism, especially when such projects are implemented in cities where the culture of public space is lacking, or it does not occur? Because I have been part of a proposal for a project on a similar scale in Amman, and one of the main challenges was how to deal with vandalism and maintenance. We were trying to choose materials and design that are very hard to be vandalized, but maybe there are other insights. Thank you for the great presentation, Olfa. So we have another question for you, Olfa. Est-ce que vous avez remarqué des prémices de changement dans l'usage de l'espace public après pandémie et lesquelles? Have you seen some premises, or let's say emergence of new change of usage of public space after the pandemic? And can you state some examples? So I'll stop here and I can help you with the question again. And then we continue after that with other questions. Yeah.
Should I answer now?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. At first, I'm thankful for your question, for your interest. So to Jasmine, yes, I do agree with you. I'm totally agree. Yes, gentrification can cause this kind of exclusion. The idea is to plan green public space in all neighborhoods, in the whole cities. I think that having a public space is a part of a right, of a city right. It's our right to have a public space. So if each neighborhood have its own public space, I think we can deal with these issues. The second question is talking about the vandalism. Yes, it's great. It's our reality to say the truth. I've only shown successful cases, and I avoid to talk about the problem. Also, Belvedere Park has suffered from vandalism last say 2 years. Yeah. So maybe the first idea is to build a wall around this public space, but I'm not sure it will be a public space. It's not a public space. By the way, many municipalities built a wall around the green garden to preserve them from vandalism. But the consequence is amazing. The consequence, as the garden in the with the wall around
the love garden. the lovers,
Yes.
garden of the lovers. Yes.
Lovers, no, now it sounds to be homeless and drugs addicts. So it inspires more fear than love, I think. So maybe to overprotect can have a negative consequence. So all we have to do is always participatory. We need culture, public space culture, and we need ways to yes.
Yes, it's to discuss mostly, you know, what we need more community development, let's say, approaches which are conducted by very active involvement of the cities, and also placemaking actually leads to the fact to occupy these spaces, to reactivate them, to make them much more dealing, because these tensions or kind of vandalism, it's actually not a challenge to face. It's actually one of the way of how people express some kind of social issues linked to poverty, linked to exclusion, linked to, you know, many other factors. And I think the fact to have a vandalism, yes, let it be vandalism. I think that the way to think about them, and to, that you said, Olfa, we should a little bit slow down in the way, because we plan to control. And we need a shift in the way how we should design more to include others rather than to design for controlling. And this is where I think we will be seeing it more with Layla and myself, because this is where we will be discussing later how you will be making placemaking for coexistence and what are the kind of sense of ownership and people. So the other side of the coin. Also a last question.
Sorry, just shortly, I can answer to my friend Fathia,
yes,
who asked about change after pandemic crisis.
Yes,
yes. Really, I can't be sure about using using a form of public space during the lockdown. But what I'm sure about is that our way of thinking or planning a city has been different, with more interest to our health and maybe a green space to improve life quality inside the city.
And it shows also with the pandemic that a lot of our open spaces are not, you know, let's say, for the public, because we have seen that with the pandemic, that the fact to only be situated in open space, how people are not, the design of cities are not done to be able much more human friendly than car, for example, friendly. So people, we saw queues of people in front of the public buildings, queuing on a very small pavements. We saw people trying to bring stones to be able to sit down because they are tired from waiting a lot through this social distancing. I think it's very interesting to see how people also have been in a certain way, let's say, provoked to occupy, to change, to shift, and they realize in a certain way that the city is not that friendly as they thought, because it's much more used for activities, etc. And the day that we need to be outside and to grasp the fact that to be a lot of people outside the building in open air, that also measuring these, let's say, urban distancing, it's something to be looked at. There is a last question that we have for Sondes. The problem of participatory approach is the lack of involvement of the inhabitants themselves. How did you overcome these difficulties?
Alors, pour l'approche participative, justement, le problème, c'est que les gens ne croyaient pas trop à cette approche au début. Donc, quand on a organisé les ateliers, ils n'étaient pas très convaincus, ils n'assistaient pas au début. Et ce qu'on a fait, alors il y avait deux sortes d'actions différentes. Alors, à Bourrara, par exemple, pour les ateliers, on a commencé par inviter les élus municipaux avec des représentants de la société civile. Et c'est les représentants de la société civile qui avaient fait les choses pour nous. Donc, c'est eux qui avaient contacté les riverains, qui connaissaient, avec qui ils collaborent. Donc, c'était déjà des gens qui étaient impliqués dans la vie associative. Alors, pour l'exemple d'autres espaces publics sur lesquels on travaille également à Séguéna, dans le nord de la Tunisie, on a fait des réunions en plein air dans les espaces publics eux-mêmes. Donc, on était réunis. On a commencé à parler avec les gens qui passaient, qui nous posaient des questions. Qu'est-ce que vous faites? Ils étaient curieux. Donc, on avait des gens avec nous. Et puis, on a commencé à agrandir le cercle des gens qui s'intéressaient, qui étaient là, qui posaient des questions. Qu'est-ce que vous faites? Et qui nous avaient dit au début clairement, on n'y croit pas trop. Vous allez nous dire que vous allez nous impliquer, mais finalement, le projet, soit vous l'avez déjà fait, soit que c'est en cours, enfin, et que vous allez le faire sans vraiment nous impliquer, mais c'est juste pour faire semblant qu'on participe. Donc, on a essayé de les convaincre comme on peut. Et moi, j'ai assisté à la réaction des gens quand on avait présenté le projet d'aménagement. Ils étaient vraiment très contents de voir qu'il y avait vraiment des éléments dans le projet qui s'inspirent de ce qu'ils avaient dit. Mais c'est vrai que c'est pas toujours évident au début.
So I will translate now to resume. So there are two stages, two examples from the project that has been related. It's actually people doesn't believe at first, especially when they are not used. And they have this culture as well of that we think that the state is the one who to care about, you know, the public domain and the city. So they are kind of surprised at the beginning. So of course there is a huge strategy, or let's say community approach, a strategy that is based first, that we need to go with the decision maker first, like municipalities that are also involving the civil society as a kind of facilitator or intermediate body between us and the inhabitant at first. So to try to gain at first their confidence and to show them that the process is also serious. And the second example is about people who we have been conducting our, let's say, workshop outside in the public domain. So people were curious, they were saying that it won't work. They were kind of, you know, a little bit, you know, surprised at first. And then when they have seen that the things are coming from the ground and that they have all their talks or suggestions have been taken into account, they started trusting the process. So I think it's not easy at first because we are in the beginning of that. We are changing a culture and mindset about first we were the one to rule, to control, and people will get used that things are much more top down. And today to be part of the grassroots and to give the people the possibility and also that they understand they are part of the process of making their cities. It's another, you know, path that we are trying to go for it. C'était bien? D'accord, très bien. Merci beaucoup. Bon, c'est vrai que ces présentations sont vraiment très inspirant. They are very inspiring presentations, and we will continue. Stay with us because we will, at the end, it will be lovely to have a debate as well on all what we'll be seeing now, because there is a lot of things to be seen, to be discussed, and I love to have a debate on also, I hope that also Roni will be here, because placemaking, making places, we are mostly people coming from one side as well, because we are part of the, let's say, placemakers, having much more power of knowledge, and to discuss about if these projects, the shortage of them, and how today we will be facing a huge challenge in our cities and in our spaces. So we'll go now with Leila Zibar with her presentation. Hi, Leila.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm really, really, really glad to be here.
Yes, so we'll go now to share your screen, Leila, and go ahead. We give you the hand to start.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's coming.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for attending and listening to me today. So today I would like to talk about three main keywords that I have been surrounded with in the past few years. As in self-mentioned, I am of Kurdish origin, and I have been born and raised in Syria, and I have been moving along since 8 years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, let's say, a personal exploration between practice and also between my academic research. So these three keywords that have been surrounding me are refugeehood, circularity, and placemaking. This journey started from what you call the global south, so Syria and Egypt, and then mainly moving up to the global north, which is Germany and Belgium, where I reside right now. And now I'm taking a look back to the global south again, and through this research, maybe in a search for roots in Iraqi Kurdistan. So far, I have been bombarded with these three main keywords, and they have been in a resurrection mood ever since. I'm putting now an attempt to understand the three words through three methods, three scales, and three questions. So first, I'm going to talk about the beginning, where everything started to change. The Syrian conflict erupted in 2012. The violent sudden impact on everyday habitat and inhabitants was quite dramatic in the destruction of the physical environment and the used to be ways of life. Here, the habitable is rendered inhabitable, if I'm borrowing Abdelmalik Simon's phrase. This change, acute or latent, depending on the conflict stage and the geographical expansion of it, put many people, like myself, on the route to seek safety and probably the possibility of a more planned continuity in the future. Camps mushroomed their way up in the reality and within and across the borders of Syria. Camps have also been part of the landscape in Iraqi Kurdistan. So if you want to zoom a little bit on the region, So if you want to zoom a little bit on the region, we need to see that this region has been also had its share of chronic conflict and violence in the past century. The region has acted since 2012 as a source for the waves of displacement since 2012. Today, in 2020, around 40% of the Syrian refugee populations live in camp. So I'm going right now to talk about three campsites, and they are, in my opinion, would hold meaning to the keywords that I have wanted to discuss further. So we talk about story one. Story one about the camp called Bardarash refugee camp. Bardarash refugee camp was recently reopened. It is now hosting the last wave of refugees since 2019 in October, after they were displaced because of the military attacks of the Turkish military that expelled many Syrians from the northern and western parts. The camp itself was first an IDP camp for the internally displaced persons since 2014. It was set to host displaced Iraqis fleeing ISIS attacks after the announcement of the ISIS fall in 2017, the camp was decommissioned and then reopened again in 2019. This camp now is hosting the new Syrians who are arriving. The camp site was also reopened. This is setting infrastructure and currently being upgraded by the cooperation of the Kurdish federal government and the humanitarian partners led by UNHCR. This is story one. So I will go to the second story. The second story dates a little bit back. So in 2013, Basirma refugee camp was opened. Basirma refugee camp was a temporary solution to absorb the endless waves of refugees crossing the Syrian borders and waiting zones until other planned camps were supposedly ready. However, these caravans were also, if you can see, the caravans were also moved and put in the camp place so we can also address and host the refugees. The site was cleared out and adjustments were made to allow the caravans to set on the ground of the camp. It didn't take much time for the humanitarian sector and responsible government to realize that the camp is needed, and it's becoming more permanent than it was set for. So consequently, the campsite needed a plant and a proper infrastructure to serve the prolonged needs, mainly water, sanitation, electricity, and roads, and also trying to take into account the harsh weathers and the conditions that the campsite needed. The caravans now are being replaced with what is called improved shelters, and these are the improved shelters, and the upgraded shelters, which will supposedly are going to look like that, to be replaced in 2019 and 2020. So moving back to the first story. The first story and the third story is about Domi's refugee camp. Domi's refugee camp hosted from the beginning all the Syrian refugees, and it reached in the peak moments of 80,000 individuals, which later on were moved to other camps. The camp was planned into operation while it was receiving refugees. And now I'll ask you to allow me to share the submarine site to go a little bit on a more in-depth journey about the camp at that time. So this was developed by Submarine Channel, which was a very interesting project, and now we're looking at the camp. So as we move with the camp spaces, how it's portrayed, we can see it was made from provisional, self-assembled somehow settings. It started from a tent, and through different practices, it endured. The needed was to endure, to get by, to move along, as refugees started to use the existing materials that flew into the camp to address the rising and spatial needs. And as you see, if you can see, this is the sketches that were taken in the initial state of the camp in 2013, which it doesn't look like right now. I will take you to a little bit to a more, let's say, detailed about how the camp construction went. And we start a little bit with a tent. So this is the basic tent. And then the durability of the tent is 6 months. And then you go to the improved tent, where there's a lot of little bit of materials were starting up. Then more and more, it gets improved. The shelter is used with wooden frames. And then we have also a lot of distribution materials flowing into the campsite. Steel frame structures, then extended frame structures with a little bit of improvised spaces. So in order to make do, refugees put together whatever they can be repurposed, made in place, making it habitable for now. So necessities such as privacy, security, well first addressed, of course. And later on, it was also followed by internal division of the occupied space into zones of daily activities and gender temporalities. So it's going to become more and more and more stable somehow. A house is looking like that for now. So as the host communities shared with the displaced the history of memories of wars, but also blood and clan kinships, forms of solidarity paralleled refugees' arrival. Many of the nearby towns and cities also checked their storages and their backyards and checked of what could be handy to be used by refugees. They were all sent to the refugee camp. So you can imagine the amount of clothes, the amount of furniture, used furniture, old washing machines, fridges, and the list is very long that are arriving into the campsite to be used by refugees. In many of my interviews when I was doing my fieldwork in the camp, most of the refugees has kind of shared the information that they got their furniture and they used it from the camp's market. Ironically, to my observation also, you can see that there is in the houses of the camp a storage area. And this storage area in each dwelling unit is to put the things that are working, currently not needed, for possible and future needs that might become someday handy. So it has been 7 years since the camp has been operating, and integration and durable solutions now are on the table. So the plan is to move ahead for the moment. This video I took when I was in the camp. It was in 2018, and this is how the camp looks right now. So still, the dwelling units till this date have temporary sandwich panel roofs and not allowed to go vertically, with the problem of water scarcity, increased needs, and sanitation infrastructure shortfall is always highlighted. To give an example, in Domi's refugee camp, the one that you are seeing right now, in its early years, the cost of desludging, which was almost a weekly occurrence, was more about than $1 million, while sludge was dumped away without treatment somewhere far where nobody knows. Later on, other camps also reported that water poisoning has been happening in the boreholes that they were using for drinking and for life purposes. And that was, the contamination was caused by the improper sanitation work and leaking into the water sources. Some solutions, of course, were offered. Many international NGOs were trying to do some work. Well, one of them is Borda, which is I had joined for a few missions, rescaled their decentralized wastewater treatment systems to be used in the camp to treat the water and sometimes also to irrigate. However, they also kind of provided solutions for more immediate responses. However, the shortfall of funding and future vision for these settings did not pass the present need-based response mode so far. So despite the blurred future, I will go back to the presentation. So despite this blurred future, and the camp became not only a place for these populations for many years, different ad hoc practices of various NGOs and international NGOs have took place in these camps and to make life easier, bearable, to serve the victims, enable them to help themselves. And as you can see, in the fluid space was repurposed. The front porch is furnished with free-used cans. These cans are distributed in the camp for other things, and they are used now as plant pots. The former tents reused into extra demarcation for threshold as a part of the unit also becomes a shop. This repurposed and reformed spaces serve as for communal activities right now. I remember while walking through the camp in 2018 one night with my friend, seeing a wedding ceremony happening in the street. And the newlyweds were sitting on refurbished sofas on the porch, and the place now, to some extent, is theirs. While these stories talk mainly about displacement and placemaking in different scales and modes, I couldn't escape the use of the prefix re in every verb that we have been using. From this point, I aim to inquire a little bit and set a link with what circularity has been a hotspot today, and at least in the academic discourse, which is surrounding me. While circularity has been portrayed in different debates, a correction move of misuse of natural resources and drastic effects. They are feeding the global climate crisis. Circularity seems to aim to make amends by looking and acting into the present as a preventative measure to decrease or eliminate the unsustainable practices and prevent them to go to the future. Now, coming to the urban setting, current debates focus more on cities, quite remarkably in the European context, of course. The focus is more or less on regenerative practices in strategic planning for policies to enable these practices, putting in mind as well different tools and ideas for promoting social behavior of reformation and to be more responsible toward these finite resources. This promotion is on a more scientific and technological advancement than a smart use solution to a problem. This approach prevents resources losses or minimizes them at least, not to compromise the economy, or at least to maximize it. The focus now more is on flows, undertaking what flows in and out of the city system. Cities are assumed to stay for indefinite future. They are fixed in geography and continuing in time. Now, the main keywords that keep rising to my topic related to circularities are always material stock, flows, and the reverbs. reuse, recycle, repurpose, refurbish, reproduce, and so on and so forth. They all look at cities as urban mines, specifically in a material sense, and they are future-oriented projects which they seek betterments in terms of resilience, sustainability. These seems to be the keywords used in many politics to promote resilience and sustainability in camps. However, they are still not beyond using solar panels and water reuse. After encountering these discussions, I couldn't stop myself from looking back at my research data and my own journey, and I couldn't stop to comfort myself with these three nagging questions again. Can the provisional ever become circular? What does circularity mean in temporary situation? For spaces are doomed to closure. In principle, camps are bounded in time, but also they are bounded in space. Yet every action, every verb in the camp seems to be attached to a re prefix. The lives of the refugees are rescued. They are recycled into a life. Their social bonds are also recycled and reattached. Their sociality is reconnected and reshaped, and their spatial settings are reused, reproduced. In camps, the practices promoted in circularities are embedded in the fragmented, unfinished urbanization processes, urban mining for affordable and possible betterment. For the refugees, petty circular, if I can call it so, petty circular practices. They are improvised actions steered by the needs of the moment and hardly looking beyond the immediate better tomorrow. Everything has a value in the camp and has to be put in use. It is reused and repurposed till it's sucked out of life, yet it's still kept somehow, somewhere for an unknown future use. These camps are part of our today's reality. The rupture of the violence exercised on people, on land, and on resources is irreversible. And the camp itself, even if it's closed or it's temporary, it is also irreversible. While the displacement camp is temporary in theory, in many cases around the world, we see that it extends beyond the interim, while patches of urbanity seems to resurface. Acknowledging this historical lesson, the current policies regarding the camp's built environment seem to try to incorporate sustainability and resilience, but still the question still rises. Now, finally, I want to ask one question, and maybe you can help me with that. Can this reality drive us to open this Pandora box and talk about circular camps the way we talk about circular cities? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leila, for this wonderful presentation and another side of the word where we are seeing here image of realities and image of what is today cities or like spaces or home or habitat is shaped in these circumstances. I will just finish with my presentation because we have a lot in common. I think that it gives a room a bit to,
as usual.
We work in the same field actually, so you know, this is another side of how also placemaking is linked to situation of temporarity, which is not. I mean, it's always about questioning. We need to have a critical thinking and having lenses and a loop and seeing everything in a very critical way to criticize it and also to be able at least to open up debates. So I will ask you maybe to stop sharing the screen. I will share mine now.
I'm not sure. I lost somehow the control panel here. Can you?
Yes, I think I will taking your power. I'm taking it.
Take the power.
I'm taking it. I'm in control. So we've been with Leila working since 2014 or 15. Yes. So it's been a long time now. So I will start my presentation, the last one of this lecture series. And of course, I will invite you hardly to profit today from this panel to ask a question, because it's an opportunity as well for if you are a student or professional or a visitor, let's say, interested about these topics, to to share with us your thoughts and to open up or to clarify things. I like my part of things, I like very much to clarify words. Words are very powerful, especially if we are an academician or a professional or student, because using them will lead, misusing them will lead to a lot of troubles as well. Today it's, I choose as a topic placemaking for coexistence. I've been so much interested about this, you know, topic, especially working now for the late 5 years in conflict situations of war, displacement, and so on. It's actually what I subtitled here, places to for share or places for diversity. Placemaking, I will make it short. What we mean here, it's placemaking existence, being together in a place, as simple as that. And why? Because coexistence in a certain way will lead afterwards, it's a theory, actually. It's a theory of coexistence. It has its tools, and I will invite you hardly to see it, because this is also give a background on the way how we make placemaking for coexistence. And coexistence means species, coexistence and niche theory. This is what we call it. And this is, it's conducted of how multiple species may coexist in a community in the face of strong interspecific competition. Interspecific competition, it's, we'll go for it. It's basically the same species, like human being, are shared very small resources, and they have to share them. And this leads to a lot of competition that at a certain level, one species will kind of be much more dominant than the other. So spatial and temporal heterogeneity in the environment in conjunction with species differences in resource use and dispersal, what we call the niche differences and trades-off, provide important general coexistence mechanisms. So here the importance word, it's about mechanisms that you have to keep in mind, and that intraspecific competition is stronger than interspecific competition. Intraspecific competition, it means that you have different species, not from the same, and they're sharing the same resources. And this is, you can, let's say, if you map it in your head, or to think about it, it's basically here we have a host and we have a guest. We have a space where we basically have a local species linked to it and another external one coming from. So in placemaking existence, it's actually, it's where we exist, or one individual, not the group, is there in a space freely, responsible about his future or his decisions and his development, and he's determining the development of his existence through his acts of the will. And the focus of that is the individual more, because we actually aim that to have a space or a place, let's say some of you used it, where we can accept difference, where we have freedom of expression, where we accept the uncommon, and where we can keep our uniqueness. And this goes also to Lefebvre and the right to the city, where actually where normally a public space or a public sphere, it's not where you know, the common or the community are existing as much as where the individual is expressing his own uniqueness. And this comes, of course, when we want to be together in one place, we need in a certain way see this in a very dynamic way. Imagine that each of us as a minority or a majority in a group, we are allowing others at the same time as ourselves to be different, to say and to be free in his expression, and to be, of course, hit by his uncommon way. So, of course, in this today, what we call them the Œcumene, or the inhabited world, we are 7 billion today, 794 million, etc. And you can see by this diagram where normally where we are, that the majority of the people are linking to be living in urban spaces, not for nothing. It's not an urbanized word. It's because cities actually is where we can be have a room or a niche to be unique. There is a slight chance that we can actually coexist, because these forms of crowdness, or what you can see here, it's actually each individual is practicing his own uniqueness, and where he can be in continuous, let's say, the competition even towards the resources, it's there by a very active process of taking off your right into a place. So what we see here as a result, of course, the question is how we can deal with that, how you'll be able to place, make, or create spaces for existence and coexistence where the people are able peacefully to express their opinion, to contest and to be there, and to use their right to be there. Because here we also, I invite you to see a little bit about the existentialism, because it comes back, is the way of if each of us has or want to be, have a purpose in his life, there is a huge presence, not in terms of resources is the problem, as much as the individual who wants in a certain way to feel his own existence, and this fight about that. So when we see the outcome of our, what is here, what we can see is what is there. This is the reality today. This is how our cities are. This is how they will be. And this is, of course, is not only the only trend. The second trend is about shrinking cities. So we have in this global world, we have places where there is much more altercation between people and people getting together. And this is not for no reason, because probably it's linked to the fact that there is much more spaces for the uncommon, and others where there are much more shrinking cities where basically we have much more a sense of community. I invite you here to see the dichotomy or let's say the paradox between both what we are saying actually, and to have this right to this space, or to be able to coexist in one, raise a lot of questions. How I can think coexistence, how I can think places, how I can think, the future of our spaces, taking into account the right of each to have the same amount and equity to reach the resources needed for his prosperity. And the way how us placemakers or designers or urban planners, or the way how we look, through our drawings, or the way how we make it, this is not, to be criticizing this image as much as to say that we are limited in terms of tools. This could not happen. And bouncing on what Leila showed, it's actually, this is the normal process of everything that will come in any kind of species that goes toward a place where they're trying to look for shelter, to look for place for existence, more before being into coexistence itself. And of course, the rise of what is happening today, what you think here, we are in a world of exceptions. We are not talking about the fact that public space, or debating on type of public space, we'll see it later, also the dangerous word of public space. The word is not neutral. Architecture is not neutral. Planning is not neutral. Design is not neutral. They involve within their own concepts of words the act of controlling and the act of being in a certain way, looking for much more common places than an uncommon places, so where there is no actual coexistence. And this will lead us in a certain way, like you see, this is an image recently of what's happening in Paris, about where these places today are. We are in the middle of, you see, contestation, and this is coexistence processes. What you see here is the fact that people are in this continuous interaction of coexistence process. So what we are talking about, and why are we so interested in creating or making placemaking for coexistence, and how we will be able to do so. So in this triangle of power and the politics and control, we are really in the middle all the time. I repeat it, in the urban politics. And as you can see it here, our Œcumene, which is, this is the world where we inhabit, and that we need to share its resources, and we need to share all what we have in terms of land, air, etc., but at the same time keep our individualism. It's also the way how people are interacting with their milieus and with the earthly space. And for that, to see it in a very dynamic way, where it can happen, of course, we can see it clearly here. It's the space, if we map it very, very clearly, what you called open space, private, public, common space, it's all based on our grid of the way how we can intend to interact with others. And so basically, if we don't take into account the distance and the science of leading of that, and the way how human being is going and keep compacting people thinking that will work out, this will lead to an explosion. And these are where we can also find some answers on the way how we can make, at the same time, creating common spaces. So the family, the neighborhood, the friends, the visitors, and at the same time, giving part to the public space. A common space is not a public space. If you look to a place where there is controlled, the same visitors, the same people are living in, where we all the time, you know, interacting, you can't relate of the bad or saying it's a good space for a public. This is part of an extension of a common controlled space, whether it comes from the community or whether it comes from the state. So of course, architects and planners, and here I quote Graham, are often still wedded to a heroic and positive self-image, where their effort necessarily work to render the world a better place. Construction and regeneration are the watchwords. The inevitable destruction, erasure, and political violence involved are obfuscated or taboo. And we don't talk about that. We try to all the time ignore the fact that we are part of this. And this is linked to a poor understanding of the politics of urban space and the role within project of militarism and political violence. Creating seats doesn't mean that you are creating it for the elderly or for the children, doesn't mean that you are not excluding. And what I'm saying here is not the fact that you shouldn't, but at least to take it into consideration which type of places you are creating and where you are displacing your problem. Because actually we end up by displacing problems somewhere else nearby. And then it's a continuous. So we are in a kind of world of exceptions where we need much more attention to understand more systems, how they work. So this is it's a very slightly, it looks like this, very cheesy, but it's really huge where you can find your tools. Because learning system theories, which is since the 60s or even before, and the way how you can understand your environment, understand how the items are interacting, spatial, socio-spatial, cultural dimensions are all going together, where your input will conduct certain transformation processes that leads to different type of stakeholders. When you're talking about participation, you are creating natural leaders. You're giving a voice for some who didn't have, but you are shutting the mouth of others. You are intervening in a certain dynamic of the space. And sometimes what we do, and even when Leila, she's saying and trying to map what kind of interaction are happening, because we forgot sometimes that we also a species on this earth, and there are a lot of territorialization and a lot of linkage between each others and a lot of interest where they need to be mapped to understand the space. And these tools, when we have, it's hugely dynamic, hugely complicated, and it could not be. So what we are doing through our project is actually, we are not making spaces. We are trying to understand a certain dynamic and also being part of the system. We understand that we also, us as a stakeholder and so on, as being even professional or working as a placemakers, we are part of this dynamic. We're creating spaces for existence and coexistence. So the public space, which I also hear, I like and I repeat all the time in presentation, this quote, is the role of public spaces molding the city politics, has been extensively theorized and studied. The shaping of citizenship and the establishment of citizen rights have been connected to struggles over and in public space, as well as to discourse that problematize public space as a constituent element of public life. So here what we see here, so please just to understand it, we can debate on it, a public space is where we dispute the common. It's not where we can leave places for the community to have what they want, and everybody's happy and managed and controlled, and where everybody is there, because the sooner that there is an external agent or a species coming on the ground, they will no longer, you know, the common is there. So this is where public space is there. Public space, what I like here is where the community normally, even between themselves, you know, and within their members, they are kind of being able to leave room for exceptions. So vandalism, destruction, like we saw also the graffitis, and the way, this is where we see that there are some premises that these places are contested some way. And this is where we are coexistent. So they are not self-contained. You can never have a place which is under control and saying that this is a public space, or place making leads to that. They are not self-contained. And of course, what I like always is the terminology that is the loose space, much better than public space, because it's much more, you know, not part of the past, but it's a little bit very complicated today. We are facing, we say public space, but we don't define it. We need to add on terminologies like this is the state public space. In French, we use a Q instead of C, etc. We're trying to adapt a word which basically it's much better to replace it by a loose space. It's a space with normally a person can come, interact, change, dynamic, and where normally there is no limit of the way how the space is. So it's actually to accept the fact that there is a space that is not planned, not controlled. We are basically also, if I reformulate it, we planned the unplanned. So we planned for things that could happen that we don't know which kind of things or scenarios that could happen, and to accept the fact that we don't control it. And of course, when we talk about that, it's more, and I emphasize about it, it's about a place which we more generate soft power relationship. And the soft power relationship, it's a type of tools and ways, and even design-wise, that they are conducting this part. Because what we do actually, we use spaces and we design them for hard power. We design benches where normally we are not able to skateboard on them. We design places where normally we give, you know, ways when the birds cannot sit in. When we put places where a homeless person can't, you know, find a niche, at least in the cold weather, to be able to find some security. And this is part of the design. We design it, and we have a lot of examples about that. So the shared authorship, what I'm talking about, this is what we want. Through what we're doing with placemaking of coexistence, it to be able to have a dynamic shared authorship of a space and a continuous, you know, mitigation of it. So it's a collective knowledge that is produced in plan and in space, and to reshape relationship. And this is what we needed to have, is to put and to design possibilities where people can come together and each, you know, interact with each other without controlling the way or what they are doing and how they do it. And this is bringing, of course, as I said, and it comes from the theory of coexistence, is to get an external agent. That's why we were talking even yesterday with Reem, the fact that you are interacting, and there are tools of it. If you are staying in the same place, reshaping, etc., you are, of course, in a way of upgrading your own neighborhood. You are an active actor. This is part of it. But you are basically making placemaking a common, but not placemaking a loose or a public space or places for coexistence. And of course, to be able to understand that there is a continuous dialogue with the other. This is what we wanted to put the base for. We need places, we need cities, we need a world where we are in a continuous, peaceful dialogue with other. The stranger, the difference, the guest, and of course, accepting the minorities, accepting the drug dealers, accepting the people who doesn't share the same opinion as you, accepting the stranger. And this is very hard, of course. This is not something that is easy, but us in intervening with what we are doing, we think at least we have to look at that in a territorial way. Sorry, here we have, remind me later. Yeah. So of course, each time that you see a place where there is a resistance, when there is an informal governance, when there is an urban clusters, where there is an informal economy, when there is a local networks of solidarity that have been created without any incentives, when there is different regenerative process, we are in the terms of coexistence. And of course, the tools that we use when we're trying to use are tools, of course, we have to try out different ways. It's more about community development through plus placemaking. So we in a certain way invite ourselves. We invite ourselves in their common ground to make a breach and to open the door for others to coexist with them. So what we do actually, it's not to be able that we want people to hear what they think. We think, I mean, we know when it comes to an area, especially vulnerable, the one, that we have an elderly people that they need sittings. We know that mothers, they need private places to play and secure places with their children. We know that we need places where we can sit from walking and we need some rest. We know that we need greenery. All of that are very known. We do participation for what? To ask people if they need a sewage, or to need that they need urban services, or they need electricity, but it's very clear. We need only to shoot some photos and that's fine. And this is the way how we deal with it. It's just to have, at least to be frank of the way of how we do it, is that the beautiful thing that happens is when we bring youth and universities, and that's why it works. Because basically design became a platform where at least open up dialogues, where at least we can understand people's fears, when we can understand their xenophobia, we can deal with their threats, and we can tell at a certain moment, people are fighting for the same resources, and it will become more scarce. Tomorrow we won't have water, we won't have electricity, we will be having to be displaced, we will be coming back to nomads, we will have closed territories, and it leads at a certain way that we have to think about a peaceful way to do it. And there is not a better way to use art, because when we say design, sometimes we think about planning, but art or activities or workshop, that's why we are using them. We are using them just to make that Tasneem can talk with this Muhammad, and they can, both of them, they can talk, and she can know more about his community, and she can share from where she comes, etc. And this is how we break up and making bridges. So the community development is a process where community members come together to take collective actions. So this is by definition, and generate solution to common problems. And here you see that we need to add on coexistence. So we need to add to this definition actually that community member in itself have to involve in a certain way other species, other people. And of course here, the project that we have, it's only a manifestation of socio-spatial dimension to placemaking, where basically we want to both are a product and a producer of change. So your project is kind of catalyzers. So the people who are involved in these workshops or in these projects, they could be only the user, the tester, the informant, or your design partner, okay? And this is where we lead in a certain way to going into a bit by bit, putting the ground of what is a place making for coexistence. It comes with of course, you can use a variety of tools, complicated boxes that we have like a packaging. And this is commonly, this is what is all practices all over the world in the field, whether you are in international development corporations, either you are an urban planner, or you are, for example, a local community. This is what people now in school learn to do. So we wanted to make participation, and from the question that we had during all these sessions, that people always question, but how people are not involved, and why people are destroying what we are doing, etc. Because actually you are not into that process. Your tools are kind of has to be much more stimulative or more used in different ways. So you have different ways of you making more creation of ground for agents of change, making much more people empowered by shaping their own environment. People shape their environment. They need from you some kind of support and some kind of also a peace or mediator of conflict resolutions part. And of course, there is a whole process of appropriation that will lead to take place. So all the projects that we did in a certain way, they are all, for me, a lot of people think that we are actually looking to creating green spaces, etc. For example, for this example of school, and Leila was part of it, where we actually wanted to create a ground when the Syrian refugees can access the school. And it was a simple way that said, okay, we'll give you a playground, and get the school children into the school. So the reality of project, in a certain way, this is how it can happen. It's trying to say, okay, they can coexist, you know, there is no a lot of difference. They can work, they can be friends. There is a conflict, okay, but there is no problem in that. And this is, of course, the way how we enter to this negotiation or this debate was by the fact that we are coming to make the playground. But the playground wasn't really the aim of the project. All what we can see here in these projects on the plane, they are very nice, but actually, to be honest with you, we don't really care if they are destroyed afterwards. Because it's used, you are part of schools where there are 2,000, 3,000 students. You can expect, even when you can use the best materials ever, you will never do it. But people, even when we talk about play, we need to be critical a little bit. Children play with everything. There is a huge misunderstanding of human interaction and human, how they appropriate their space and how they can dream about it and how they can talk about it. We need just to create a room of encountering people, of discussion, of brainstorming, of people having laughs during workshops, people trying new tools, sharing knowledge, being proud of what they do. And this is have much more impact than anything else. And of course, making the places more nicer with the less tools ever that we do, based on what the people suggest and how we can analyze their way, how they interact, they are surprisingly kind of also feeling a bit rooted and a bit less tension, but it won't last forever. It needs a lot of perpetual. So it's a continuous process of working on creating spaces for everyone. And especially we should forget that we need to make much more dignified spaces for people. We can't omit the fact that if we keep having the people to participate with us while these people are lacking food, lacking security, lacking shelter, lacking things, we are responsible of that. So your question, all of it, is how to turn space into a community node. First of all, this is one stage, and then after it comes the place for coexistence, the public space. And in our MENA region, actually, we didn't even give a room for this community node. This is what we are describing about our old cities, is where there is a community, where today everybody is saying, but there is none. And this is the duality of both. And this is kind of social transformation led also by our type of architecture, by our practice of space. And this is to be able after that to conduct a place for coexistence, and where we have a sense of ownership, where we have bonding and bridging with other people, where we talk about a real participation. Because the word is now gone as well. We are much more into let's go into kind of a fight towards a space. Let's go interacting, which much likely peaceful one. This is what leads to a certain way that people also, when you do a construction, people should be involved in. We need a lot of changes in terms of policies, of the way how we practice our work. We need people that they build by themselves. We need people to incite them to do it by themselves. We need them that we have open air interactions happening. So the loose space, the public space, where there is a peaceful reshape of relationship in an endless process, which I'm trying to say, and this urban commoning, when we normally they have spaces where they are owned, managed, and shared resources and responsibilities, we think that with majority of our approaches, we are going much more into the urban commoning than creating of real loose space, which actually exists in, for example, the example of Layla, where they are happening, where they are, these mechanisms are shown. And of course, this creation of, the creation of, or the mind shift of the way of thinking, of how we can bridge what we learn and how we can see the spaces, and how, of course, a simple element could have a huge impact on the way these places are, let's say, shared or discussed and in common way. And this is what leads in a certain way. We have a major role in trying to create rooms for possibilities. We are designing possibilities. We are not designing places. Milieu places are a product of something. And this is what we say, that of course we shift from more a regulator, a deliverer, and to allow things, to more to empower. And this is where we have all of us shared responsibilities. And of course, if I map it this way, this is where we develop design solution to govern the commons and to leave room for loose space. So a place, a loose space where we can dream, where we can interact, when we can accept and leave room for imaginative, manifestation of people, and trying in a certain way to see, okay, this is the way how we can live together. This is the way how we are not, you don't have to be afraid from the other. This is the way that we can manage shared resources, even though they are scarce. And this is the way how we capitalize on the fact to be so much, 7 billion on this earth, but at the same time that space, it's divided, we can divide it, but we can keep its continuity. We can expand it. And even though we are living in a place in that sense, people can be watchers. They can see it, they can interact from far away. They can see, okay, this is what I think or not. And this is, I love this photo because people, when we were designing actually, and having the workshop, they were giving us also their opinion and they were sharing from. So the spot where you actively work, it's not also coming from, let's say, let's choose it. It comes to you. And of course here, what I say that there is a lot of dynamics happening, especially among the youth and among the children. And it's not for nothing or that we practically work with them. Because actually this is where we should work most. Because they are driving the change. They are the way, it's a whole mindset. It's the way of also to tell them this is where we are today in this world. This is the reality. This is how we name things. And of course, the way how you do it within your work is that you need to keep and to dig more in your theories. We have a lot of solutions today. We have a lot of tools and ways of how we can make this happening. And through, of course, collaborative generative activities where we go through from this to more dynamic, uncontrollable way, putting ourselves within. So we need to create actually places for coexistence are more places where we can all the time renegotiate social spatial relationship. Thank you. Here we go. We finished today. So this is how we end it. No, so it's open the debate now. Here we go. So we have a question. Yes. So we have a question. I will put my hat of the moderator now. So here we go. So Layla, thank you, Layla. It's from Sarah Nawar for the great input. My question may not be exactly on the topic of circularity, but it's more on the appropriation the refugees do on their shelters. Are the entities in change be in, I just have to read it. Sarah, are you here? Is it much better to ask your question live? Are you here? Sarah, she's part of the project. Yeah, here you are.
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi, Sarah.
It's good to
Hi,
see
Layla.
everybody.
Thank you very much for the very interesting and beneficial presentation. My question is more into the appropriations that you showed in the submarine website, the website that you showed us. It was really interesting how refugees were appropriating their shelters based on their needs. And I really think this knowledge is what really should be taken into consideration when shelters are designed. Like, for example, I'm comparing to the situation in Jordan and the refugee camp. And the shelters, when they were designed to be put in Zaatari and other camp, they were like, the refugees' perspective were not really taken into an aspect of the whole situation. And I was thinking if this is like the situation is different in the case you presented, or if it is really like starting to be taken into consideration now, whether from the UNHCR or any NGOs or the municipality, the government. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for the very interesting question. I would like first to say that the thing with camps, as usual, it's very political. So it depends on how much the governments actually allow these changes to happen and to which extent, you know, it is also appropriate, how much refugees want to invest, how much they are going to stay. It's about time span, it's about future expectations. So in the early stages usually of the camp, there's always an improvised practices to make do. You know, you need to have a private space, you need to have a certain measure, but you do not invest unless you have moved from what is called eventualities, you know, like I have to do this because I need to recuperate. And then I want to do this because, you know, I need a little bit more room for myself. I need the place to look a little bit nicer. So this kind of, you know, demarcation between what I need now as an immediate basic need of what makes me feel as a person, as a human being who has self-continuity, some self-containment somehow, is a little bit different. Second, there is a very important thing. There is the things that the refugees do, but there's an infrastructure that provides this. You cannot ignore that the NGOs or the governments are also enabling this kind of practices by providing space, by providing materials. Yes, it is limited, but it is in the same time has the other role. So we cannot just eliminate and say, well, refugees are doing that. No, it's not like that. It's not as you know, as black and white. It's kind of a process of negotiation, a little bit talking, a little bit seeing if you belong or not, and how much you can invest. So I would say this kind of improvised ways, unfortunately, which is a lesson learned from not only the camps, but also the slums everywhere, in every country, that there's a little bit people who are somehow disadvantaged because they are put in the other side of the power relations. They do have a way to represent and get the way away with things. But how good it is, it's another question. And how good in whose perspective? You know, who is the judge of this is good or bad? So is it the refugee or is it the government? And then you will understand this. It's like always an iteration of who's in power at that moment of time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's always the government who's in power in those kind of situations.
I would argue this is not quite true. I would say it is also, there's a limitation and there is possibilities.
Yeah, true. It depends on the context, on the like the site or the country or how the politics are in the
yes, of course, but we can all. I mean, there's always a little bit room that people push through.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wish that some let's put it this way, some projects have been taking this into account. Based on John Turner's projects were in the 70s, were more of sites and services, where there was a lot of infrastructure put and supposedly people should enact. And there's also the project in Chile for Elemental, for example, building half houses and allowing the other people to build. Yeah. So there is always kind of emergence of things around the world. The thing is, you know, we need to be more focused on still voicing out these improvised ways, and also understanding the processes and relation to time expectations, I would say. Because time expectation, how much do I want to invest and how much do I want to stay? Am I forced to stay here so I don't feel like I belong? Or am I developing good bonds with the space? This is all need to be taken into consideration, I would say.
Yeah.
But it's all in an enmeshed game. You cannot just say, This is my opinion anyway, but we will see if it changes in future.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Insaf, you're muted.
Thank you, Sarah, for the question, and Laila for the answer. So I think we are actually, I don't know, there are a lot of comments about inspiring. Thank you very much for the presentation, very interesting, etc. We are starting actually normally in 15 minutes. We took a lot of time today, but it was wonderful presentations. I think Ronnie will do the best because we have, after this private public lecture, we have the private tutoring of our groups of projects. But thank you very much. Thanks for our guests. They are all part of placemaking platform. So I repeat it again, we are here to share our knowledge, to talk, to debate, and this is part of a collective will. And I hope that next year we will continue more of spreading knowledge, giving room for discussion about the placemaking in the MENA. And special thanks to Ronnie, who started placemaking MENA first in Lebanon and placemaking platform. He's a believer in the fact that we need something in the MENA, something tailored for us, something that highlights our also good practices and our challenges.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
I wanted to thank you, everyone, for our presentations today. I noticed that I think we have all the common needs in our region, in the MENA region, even in the cities or in the camp or everywhere. So thank you for today. Thank you, Ansar. Thank you,
Everyone for attendance. Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Merci beaucoup, Elsa. Thank you.
C'est un plaisir. À très bientôt. See you soon.
Thanks, Elsa.
It will be broadcasted later. We'll have a lot to be coming later here. So
Yeah, sure.
bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.